Just what do you have to do when a queen decides she's going to pop in to see you, and not just any old queen, Victoria?
Like a pair of obsessed Victoria groupies, we're pursuing her around the country to the posh pad she visited.
We'll be delving into her personal diaries to reveal what happened behind closed doors.
Today, Scone Palace.
We've come north of the border to the gateway of the Highlands, in the steps of Queen Victoria when she journeyed to Scotland in 1842.
Oh, you're right there, Pets.
And as someone who's spent a lifetime getting excited by antiques, I'll be upstairs exploring just what would have excited Victoria on her visit here.
These Scots have got our chair.
And as a chef who's passionate about all sorts of food, I'll be going downstairs to the kitchen where I'll be rediscovering a fantastic 19th century recipe that was served to Victoria.
Give it a really good breathe, get breathing on there.
And letting Tim take the biscuit.
Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria.
Here we are in Scotland, and what a wonderful setting.
It sure is. It's nearly 140 years since Victoria and her almost newly wed husband set out on their groundbreaking tour of this northern outpost, which started a lifelong love affair with Scotland.
For the young married couple, this was a pleasure trip. Now, they'd left their 2 young children at home, but they didn't know how this visit was going to be received.
That's because it was less than 100 years since the English massacre of the Scots at Culloden. So Victoria had to find a way of reconnecting with the Scottish people, and what better place for this charm offensive than Scone Palace, as it was here that all the ancient kings of Scotland were crowned.
What a fascinating place. I can't wait to have a look and see what it looked like when Victoria arrived in 1842. So I'm going to be heading upstairs.
Well, I'm heading downstairs to see how the servants coped north of the border for the Queen's visit.
Victoria and Albert, who'd been married for 2 years, travelled from Edinburgh and arrived here on the evening of Tuesday, September the 6th. This was a whistle-stop tour of Scotland, and they had to leave the very next morning for Perth. Amazingly, their host, the Earl of Mansfield, had been planning the trip for 2 years, but ended up with just 12 hours to impress the Queen. No pressure then.
Well, it would have been just like this for Victoria, because she too was piped into Scone, except by masses of bagpipers. You can imagine the scene. Her carriage majestically driving up this driveway through that rather quaint archway behind me. Well, you'd be wrong, because actually that archway was too small for her carriages, and the Earl of Mansfield had especially constructed a massive new driveway into the palace so that Scone Palace would have looked like this.
In her diary, Victoria recalls a fine-looking house of reddish stone, and that was it. The poor old Earl of Mansfield might have been hoping for a slightly better write-up, given the incredible DIY job he did on the place. He not only laid a new driveway, he completely renovated the palace. Of course, it wasn't strictly a do-it-yourself job. He was far too posh for that.
The architect William Atkinson was charged with re-establishing the Gothic style based on the original medieval building. But there were 1 or 2 problems along the way. His clerk of works misunderstood instructions. And as a result, a lot of those original medieval features were lost forever. A great shame, but strangely reassuring that even in the early 19th century, there were cowboy builders.
Let's hope the Earl had enough dosh left for the inside.
Today, these corridors lead to the offices that keep the modern palace running. But in 1842, they would have been bustling with maids, housekeepers and butlers. One room does remain downstairs, the kitchen, where all the royal food was prepared. Our own head chef, food historian Ivan Day has been researching just what Scone served up for Victoria and Albert. Hello, Ivan.
Rosemary.
I'm so excited to be in Scotland. So what have you got Scottish cookery for me today?
Well, it's very, very Scottish, and it's something that was actually served to Queen Victoria. We're going to be making shortbread. And what's so exciting about it is that an Italian confectioner was brought up from London, a man called William Jarin.
Jarin, yes.
Yeah, very famous. And he produced a wonderful ornamental shortbread in the form of a thistle. So very, very simply, we've got butter, flour and sugar, which are the main elements. We've got 2 ounces of self-raising flour, which we're going to put into 19 ounces of plain flour. And then 2 ounces of rice flour that goes in. And we're specifically told in this Victorian recipe to put half of the sugar in. So I'm going to put about 4 ounces. There's 8 ounces there altogether. And then the next job, which I'm going to give to you, because I know you love this sort of thing.
I've just rolled my sleeves up. I am so pleased.
If I cut the butter in for you,
Yes, thank you.
you can start to rub it in. That's holding together nicely.
It's holding together brilliantly.
So what we do now is I'd like you to stop. You nowadays would not moisten this with an egg.
No, I wouldn't.
What would you?
Well, what I would do now, I'd bring it together and get it into the ball, and then I would literally just mount it round and press it down.
Well, we're going to add an egg because that's how it was done.
How
in
interesting.
the 19th century. Yeah.
Can't wait.
We're going to put the sugar in.
Right.
We're going to break the egg into that, okay? You rub the egg into the sugar and then gradually work it with the tips of your fingers until you have it completely evenly amalgamated throughout the bowl, okay? Yep. I'm going to do a bit of clearing away, Rosemary, while you do that.
This is what it's all about, preparing real Scottish fare, just as they did for the Queen in 1842, and in this very same kitchen. Apparently, Victoria was very fond of her shortbread, and I can't wait to try it out on the nearest I'm going to get to royalty today, Tim.
Queen Victoria and her party would have descended from the carriages outside and come into this delightful space called the Octagon. And I bet you a quid she would have noticed this table, which is a particular treasure of Scone Palace and is, of course, octagonal to fit this room. It was created by the Regency cabinet maker George Bullock, who was a specialist in cut brass, and most appropriately, the border running around the outside is inlaid with the quintessential Scottish element, a thistle in cut brass. One thing that Victoria would not have done, though, I promise you, is to hunker down like this and sniff the drawer lining. Not many visiting queens go round sniffing drawer linings in stately homes, but if she had, her nose would have told her that that's made of solid cedar. And I reckon that a cedar will have fallen in the park and George Bullock will have taken that timber away and crafted this extraordinary object. Timber! Many of the trees on the Scone estate ended up as beautiful furniture made just for Victoria's visit, and most of it was produced by a local company called Ballingall's, who formed a close alliance with the Earl. It was a bit sticky, all this, for the Earl of Mansfield. He knew 2 years beforehand that Victoria was due to visit, but yet he was sworn to secrecy. He wanted to upgrade the facilities inside the palace, and he writes, "I have been obliged to take Ballingall into my confidence. Otherwise, my furniture would not be ready." We know that the Earl spent the equivalent of £75,000 with Ballingall doing reupholstery in the palace before Victoria arrived. And it's also known that he provided this suite of dining room furniture. There's one interesting thing that I've loved finding out from the family papers, and that is that the Earl, when writing to his mother on the 8th of August 1842, so barely a month before the Queen's arrival, he's saying that the visit is very inconvenient, yet impossible to decline. But such is his pride in playing host to Her Majesty that he simply couldn't say no. Here at 8 o'clock, just an hour after she arrived, with the porcelain, crystal and silverware gleaming in the light of candles and lamps, Victoria dined with her loyal subjects. The guest list, carefully chosen by the Earl, included the Duchess of Norfolk, the Earl of Aberdeen, the Earl of Liverpool, even the Prime Minister, Robert Peel, was here. Ballingall, the interior furnisher, makes another appearance here in the drawing room because, no doubt as a part of his £75,000 reupholstery bill, he provided for the Earl all this silk for the panels in the drawing room walls, specifically for Victoria's visit. Now, they look somewhat déshabillés, which is a French word for clapped out. That's because the brilliant sunshine streaming into this room has faded them and made them brittle. But originally, when Victoria walked through this room, they would have been as blue as my eyes.
As Victoria was being ushered through the drawing room, downstairs the kitchen would have been in full swing. I'm making an original shortbread recipe with food historian Ivan Day, which was actually served to the Queen during her stay.
Isn't it wonderful?
So far, we've mixed sugar, butter and flour. Next we press and roll the dough, ready to place in the mould.
We're going to start off by making a very traditional shortbread.
Right.
Which will be in this form here, which I'm sure everyone has seen. It's a shortbread mould. This is a 19th century one, probably from the time of Victoria's visit. Okay. And it has another bit of kit which is absolutely essential, which is this. This is called a docker.
Yeah.
And you know the little holes you get in
Yes.
biscuits?
Yes.
Well, that's a biscuit docker or a shortbread docker. So what we've got to do is to ensure that we can get this out of the mould. So we're going to do two things. We're going to dust it with some rice flour, and we're also going to put a little bit on the board. So this is the traditional way of dusting your board. We're going to take a little bit more than ½ pound off the...
It's gorgeous,
Look at it, isn't it beautiful?
This, I have to tell you, this is absolutely beautiful.
I'm going to make it into a round. I'm going to pop it onto the mould. Like that. And then with a great deal of care, again with our hand, we're going to push it in. And using the knife, we first of all trim a little bit off from one side.
Okay.
And we can then get the excess off, which I'd like you to just gently roll up into a little ball, and we can make some smaller ones of that.
Oh, lovely, yes.
And now I'm going to separate the edges out. Can you see? So that they're not actually touching. And I'm going to push that in like that. The next thing is to make sure that this is going to come out, and we can guarantee that by banging it. And then it's a very swift and careful movement, and there is our perfect shortbread.
That is brilliant. And then you take your docker.
Yeah, now be very careful, because the first one will be able to test the quality of the dough.
Right, let me check.
If we put it in like that...
Oh, you go right to the bottom?
You go right through.
Okay.
The docking is essential because it stops the shortbread from puffing up. So any air that gets trapped actually is released when you put the holes in. So the next thing is to really get it onto the baking tray. It's just a case of just letting it go on. So you've got room for another one?
Try and have a go?
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you make one in the form of a thistle, like Jarine?
Oh, fantastic.
Pat that out into a round.
I need to do my flour, don't
Exactly. Get it exactly in the middle and make sure that it's even. Okay, now gentle push. Stop. Take it off. Perfetto.
How wonderful. Now,
just cut it carefully. It should fit exactly. That's perfect. Lift it off. Look at that.
that is beautiful.
Just a quick slide underneath it. Okay, perfect. And again, just gently next to the other one. Isn't that beautiful?
I think that is absolutely stunning.
The shortbread now goes into the oven for 20 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius, or in those days, a moderate oven. And when it's ready, Ivan and I will be adding some right royal decorations.
The Queen didn't want to sleep upstairs, so requested ground floor apartments instead. Just what the cash-strapped Earl didn't want to hear. So once again, in came the builders to create a new suite, fitted with a private dressing room for Albert and, of course, the royal boudoir. All this work for a 12-hour visit, about 6 of which would have been spent in this bed, which Victoria and Albert shared. Pretty unusual for the monarchy. But Victoria was not straight-laced. She was on her hulls, after all, and the kids were at home. Nudge, nudge, say no more.
On arrival in her rooms, Victoria would have been on a mission. I mean, aren't most women, having been in an open carriage all day on a mission? Where do they go when they're on a mission? Well, logically, not to a bookcase. But this is a bookcase with a difference. If you reach around here to that secret button and press it, the jib door, which is this bookcase itself, opens up. And Victoria would have headed inside to her other throne. At least, what's left of it.
The Earl had thought of everything, even a secret ladies' room. But it wasn't just the renovations upstairs that he had splashed out on. The house archivist, Sarah Adams, has a revealing account of exactly what he spent on the catering and the staff downstairs.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
I believe you've got a very special book to show me.
Yes, that's right. We have a book of
it.
expenditure for the time that the Queen was at Scone. So it shows us what was spent on food and groceries and also on servants as well.
For a flying visit of just 12 hours, it's remarkable how much food was ordered in.
Some paid for butcher and meat £38, 14 shillings and 9.5 pence.
That's about £1,700 in today's money.
When we compare it what was paid in preceding weeks, we've got £14 the week before and £6 the week before that, so there was quite a significant jump. The total for that week was £69, 8 shillings.
That would be in today's figure about £3,000.
The Earl spent all this money on food, but it looks like Victoria might have been on a detox plan.
Skim milk? Were they worried about skim milk in those days? Green tea? That's quite sort of healthy and organic, sort of thing you get in health shops.
If the Earl pushed the boat out on all the meat and groceries, you should see the booze list.
Something else that may be of interest was how much they spent on wine and beer.
That's always... So, 7th of June, they spent £1, 8 shillings. But in September, they spent £52 and 6 shillings. It's no wonder they had to save up for this particular visit.
Yes.
And I think when it was done, it was a big relief, I would imagine. And then they spent the next few years trying to recover.
The man who served up the booze to Victoria was the butler. It was said in all establishments it was his duty to rule. Derek Brown knows all about the man in charge on that special day in 1842.
Tell me about this butler. What was so special about him?
Well, his name was Matthew Gloag, and he was the butler and cellarman here, and gained quite a degree of experience in good fine wines and spirits and food. He was at a young age in charge of the cellar here, and he's probably his late teens, and he at the same time started a family business in Perth. The Gloag family were from the area, and he utilised the experience gained here at the palace to set up this business, selling good food, fine wines and spirits.
Before Victoria's visit, Matthew Gloag had stopped working here to concentrate on being an entrepreneur. But his food and wine business grew such a fine reputation that the Earl called him back into service for the Queen's stay. This was the ultimate honour. During Victoria's visit, what exactly was his role here?
He would have done everything from polishing the plate on the entrance into the palace to making sure that everything was in the right place in the bedrooms, to the pre-dinner drinks, to the service at dinner, and coordinating the position in which the Queen would sit at dinner. You know, in these days, the Queen would never sit with her back to the windows, for example. So it would be Matthew's job to make sure that all of those little details were looked after.
It's amazing just how much effort went into this visit, especially as it was only 12 hours long.
On the morning after Victoria arrived, she wrote in her diary, "We walked out and saw the mound on which the ancient Scotch kings were always crowned. And they were crowned on top of this, the Stone of Scone. Except this one's a fake here for the tourists. Where the original is a bit of a mystery. We know that after Edward I was crowned here, he decided to have the stone shipped down to Westminster. But many Scots still cling to the belief that the stone that was moved wasn't, in fact, the original."
The story goes that the Abbot of Scone knew that Edward was heading to the monastery with the precise intention of nicking the stone. So he had a quick one knocked up as a replacement, and it's that he gave to Edward to take away, whilst preserving the original safely. If it's true, this would mean that the stone that's been used in London for the coronation of generations of monarchs, including Victoria, is bogus.
I wonder what Victoria's take on all this was. After all, she was on somewhat of a charm offensive in Scotland, and yet she surely would have liked to have sided with Edward's story. Of course, no one really knows the absolute truth, but in 1996, the stone in Westminster was returned to Scotland, and it now stands in Edinburgh Castle.
But somebody round here is taking the mickey. Because have a look at this. Inside the Earl's shed, I've got Edward I's coronation chair, which has been nicked from Westminster Abbey. These Scots have got our chair. And in this box back here, we've got the Stone of Scone ready to tuck underneath. What's going on then? It's a disgrace. The truth of the matter is that this is a film prop. A replica made for a movie that's been left behind in this shed. At least, I think it is. This is all very confusing.
What a saga. While Victoria was admiring the Stone of Scone, downstairs the royal shortbread was baking away. After 20 minutes in the oven, it's left to cool. And just as Scone's master confectioner, Maitre Jerome, would have done, it's time for Ivan and me to add a very special bit of decoration.
We're going to use some of the techniques that Jerrin used to ornament foods like shortbreads. I thought the most appropriate thing to do for Victoria is to use a mould from his time, and you press sugar paste into these, and this makes a crown.
And you build it.
You build a crown.
Build it together.
Yeah, and I've made one earlier.
Let's have a look.
And there it is.
Oh, that is amazing. Look at this.
The traditional symbol of the crown was a crown on a cushion.
So shall I put that on top?
Put it on the cushion, but we're going to gild this so it looks like gold.
Oh, how incredible.
I've actually got some gold leaf. And it's on what is called a gilder's pad, which is this soft chamois leather pad.
It's very delicate stuff,
Yeah.
isn't it?
The technique that I'm using is one that Jerrin tells us about. He tells us the day before you gild your sugar to paint gum arabic and sugar solution onto it. So I did that yesterday, and I've let it dry for 24 hours. Well, because if you feel that, it doesn't feel sticky, does it? But it's covered with gum arabic. You used to get them on the stamps, and you licked it. Instead of licking it, we have to breathe on it. I want you to do that on that area there. While you're doing that, I'm going to cut a little bit of gold leaf. And then with a great deal of care, I lift it up from the pad. Like that. You can let me have that, Rosemary, that's fine.
I think it's sticky enough.
We'll concentrate on that bar there. And we'll just drop the gold onto it like that. And then, using a very fine brush, we will tap it down. And then, we're going to brush it off. Can you see what happens? Mm-hmm. So it only goes on to the actual yellow bit, okay? Now I'll get you to do the Auburn cross on the top, so give it a really good breathe, get breathing on that. And I'm going to cut you a piece of gold, okay? Pick up.
Yep.
Right, now, just let it sort of go of its own volition, and so, no, go a bit lower. Can you see it will go to it?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, you got it? Perfect. And fold it down the other side. Yeah, don't worry too much.
No, I'm not.
Right, now just sort of damp it down so it goes into all the little creases of the design. And on the back as well. Lovely. It's just a little tap, 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 tap. And then once you're sure you've got it all attached, you can then gently brush the excess off and it will shine like real gold. That's a very good attempt.
That's brilliant.
That's 9 out of 10, that is.
Oh,
Perfect.
thank you
Very good
very
indeed.
much. 9 out of 10? I'm pretty chuffed with that. It's time to present our gilded treat to our own Lord of the Manor himself. And what better way to wash it down than a glass of Scotch whisky?
Now, Rosemary, I thought you'd be cooking scones here at Scone, and you've been doing shortbread.
Well, I think it's very appropriate shortbread, actually, because, first of all, have you ever seen anything quite so grand in terms of shortbread?
Well, the array of shortbread, I have to say, knocked out by this. Tell me about this joker with a crown on the top.
Well, this is gold leaf.
Is it
on
really?
Here. You wouldn't have eaten it, you would have just presented it. And I think Queen Victoria would have been absolutely thrilled.
Now, I don't like to break this because it's your special creation,
well,
but I am longing to taste it.
Here we go. It's going to give you that bit.
Oh, yes.
There we go.
For my nibble.
For your nibble.
Okay.
Now I'm going to take a little bit off here.
Mm-hmm. Mmm.
Mmm.
It's buttery.
Mm-hmm.
It's crumbly.
I love this. I absolutely adore it. I think Ivan's very clever. I really do.
I think you're both very clever. Almost as clever as Queen Victoria. Here we are, seated underneath this tree, a tree that she referred to in 1842, and she wrote, "Before our window stands a sycamore tree, planted by James VI, and this is the very tree." Don't you think that's extraordinary?
I think this is a magnificent tree. It really is.
But the most remarkable thing is that the Earl spent 2 years planning this fleeting visit.
Despite all this work and effort, the new driveway, all this cookery that you've been doing, the expenditure on the furniture, the whole flim-flam for this visit, and Victoria was only here for 12 hours.
It's incredible.
And therefore, I think we need to have
I think definitely
a drink.
a toast to Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ah, yes.
Next time on Royal Upstairs Downstairs.
Wonderful Walmer Castle in Kent.
Like Victoria and Albert, we're going to take in the sea air as they try to escape the glare of the royal spotlight for a romantic getaway by the coast.